Thank you, Maharishi. Uh, Good afternoon, everybody. I am grateful to CIHTS for giving me a chance to present something before the learned gathering, who are all great scholars in the field of Buddhist studies as well as Tibetan studies. This seminar is in the name of a person whose contribution to Indian philosophy, especially to Buddhism, if overlooked, will be like cutting the branch of the tree on which we are sitting. I must congratulate this famous institute for drawing the attention of people, especially the younger generation, to such a person who led a life exemplary to all of us. As my previous speaker, Mr. Ovijit Haldar of IBC, pointed out that Rahul Sankrityayan is a multifaceted personality, a prolific writer, a Buddhologist, a politician, and a Marxist, and at the same time, a multilinguist. He wanted to present the legacy of India before the global scenario, and he found that this can be done only through Buddhism. That is why we find that throughout his life, he made several journeys, and those journeys were not very easy ones to Tibet to find out the treasures from those monasteries. So, the next slide, please. History of Buddhism, especially of Buddhist logic and epistemology, would have remained incomplete. The names of father-like figures, father figure logicians like Dignago, Dharmokirti, Basubandhu, Asanga would remain as fictitious characters, as empty names, empty proper names, having occurrences in the writings of the opponents without any actual reference. That such a situation did not happen actually goes completely to the credit of Rahul Sankrityayan. By his undaunted, single-handed attempt, he brought to light the manuscripts of great masters like Basubandhu, Asanga, Dignaga, Dharmokirti, and also little logicians like Gyanasri Mitra, Ratnakirti, to mention a few. Please, next. It may be noted that Rahul Sankrityayan's discovery of the treasures, the original Buddhist manuscripts from the not so well-known monasteries of Tibet, not only gave impetus to the study of Buddhism, but also threw new lights on the researches on Indian philosophy in general. The intellectual rivalry, why I am saying that this discovery of Rahul Sankrityayan is very much interested for learning the actual, for learning the entire Indian philosophy, not only of Buddhism, but of the other schools also, even the orthodox traditions. Why? Because we know that in the Indian philosophy, the method that is generally followed is technically called khandana mandana. That is, whenever any writer of any school wants to establish his own view, or the view of a particular school, what he does is present the view of the opponent philosopher or the opponent school, and then refutes those views. After the refutation, they generally establish they present their own arguments to establish their conclusion. Now we all know that in the case of Buddhism, the opponents were the Nyaya-Vaisheshikas, or the orthodox schools like the Nyaya-Vaisheshikas, the Vedantas, and others. Now, these Nyaya-Vaisheshika system, these Brahmanical systems, they always criticized the Buddhists because their views were totally contrary to what the Buddhists believed. Therefore, whenever they wanted to establish their own conclusion, first of all, they attacked the Buddhists, especially the Buddhist philosophers, logicians, and then they presented their views. This we find in Matshayana and even in Shankara and others. But before Rahulji's discovery, what happened is that we came across these names in the writings of Uddotakara or Udayana and others, because they all criticized logicians like Dingnago, Dharmakirti. But we could not find any text of these logicians. Naturally, what happened is that when you want to refute the view of someone, you must try to present it in your own way. So naturally, the presentation of the Brahmanical school of the Buddhist views were not or did not do justice to Buddhism. Therefore, it was a fact that even if we look at the works of the before the 1950s, we would find that their view was rather to their view was rather all the philosophers, all the thinkers who wanted to work on Buddhism, they actually tried to construct their arguments from the view of the Purvapakshas quoted by the Nyaya or the Buddhists. But these schools did not represent Buddhism properly. Therefore, it was essential to find out what was actually contained in the Buddhist text. And hence, not only for the Buddhists, but for knowing why had the Nyaya and the Mimamsaka thinkers had to make revisions in their own theories constantly, necessity demanded the discovery of the missing links. Okay, and it is the contribution of Rahul Sankrityayan that we are able to find out the missing links. Because with his missionary zeal, Rahulji discovered 1,37,000 slokas, sorry, and he felt that this was only the tip of an iceberg. He visited Tibet 4 times for the discovery of the manuscripts in 1929, 1934, 1936, and 1938, and spent 15 months in the first and 6 months in his subsequent trips. And in all these 4 trips, he had to face immense difficulties. The difficulty that Rahulji faced had been mentioned by Altekar. I want to quote that so that our students might know it. The work was full of difficulties, in the words of Altekar. The work was full of difficulties. No accurate information was easily available, and it was not always easy to persuade the monks to permit the photographic work. Very often, he had to wait patiently for weeks to get the keys of the manuscript rooms. There were robbers on the way. Funds were not ample, and photographic materials was also insufficient. However, none of these difficulties could deter Rahulji to fulfill his mission. So, so, in spite of all the difficulties that he faced, he secured the photographs of more than 80 important works, which include almost the whole of Pramanavartika, along with its commentaries and sub-commentaries, Badonnayo, and the sub-commentaries of the other 2 texts, Hetubindu and others, Sambandha Pariksha and others. Now, the question may arise, why Buddhism? What made Rahulji interested in Buddhism? From the life story of Rahul Sankrityayan, we know that he, even as an Arya Samaj member, he went to Sri Lanka, and there he had he did study all the Tripitakas. So from this we can know that he could get the idea of the entire Buddhism, which was of the Sravakojano tradition. But he failed, since he had expertise on the other orthodox systems of Indian philosophy. He felt that the mere knowledge of this the Sravakojano tradition is not sufficient to learn Buddhism. So he wanted to have a total view of Buddhism. For him, Buddhism is primarily a cultural and intellectual heritage rather than as a religion. He regarded Lord Buddha, not merely as a religious figure, but as a profound thinker and a symbol of India's philosophical achievements. If we go through not only his observation on the philosophical texts of Dharmakirti, but his other works, like Darshana Digdarshana or Bauddha Darshan, or even Vaigyanik Vastubad, we find that he has pointed out the scientific spirit of Buddhism, and he has shown to us, or that is, he has presented before the world that India is not a country of black magic and worship of supernatural entities, but India is a country believing in rationality, believing in scientific spirit. And this scientific spirit he had found in Buddhism, or that is in the words of Buddha, in the advices of Buddha. For him, Buddhism thus epitomized India's contribution to global civilization and was a source of national pride. Sankritayana emphasized Buddhist values such as compassion, atheism, and economic equality, which he believed offered a robust foundation for humanistic ideals. Next slide, please. Now, here we find that what Rahulji is trying to present before the entire world, that so far the for the Western people, India was represented to be a country full of dogmas and who always practiced who black magic, etc. But it was Rahulji who showed that no, this is not the proper picture. Buddhism, there is a school of Buddhism who has this sort of rationalist spirit, this scientific attitude to verify, to check everything. So he has shown that that Buddhism is a philosophy which not only tries to explain every mundane phenomena in a scientific way, and at the same time it gives emphasis on the cultivation of values which are essential for making human life better. Sankritayana emphasized that Buddhist values such as compassion, atheism, economic equality, Sankritayana emphasized Buddhist values such as compassion, atheism, and economic equality, which he believed offered a robust foundation for humanist ideals. Thus, central to his philosophy was the integration of Buddhism with Indian cultural nationalism. He sought to revive India's historical and cultural prominence by reconnecting with its Buddhist legacy. This commitment was evident in his extensive efforts to retrieve the lost texts of Buddhism from Tibet and his advocacy for the restoration of the ancient centers of learning such as Nalanda, Vikramoshila, and others. For Sankritayana, Buddhism symbolized the intellectual and moral grandeur that India once represented on the world stage. Now we all know that Rahul Sankrityayan was also a follower of Marxism. Was also a former of Marxist socialism, but it is to anyone, to any student of philosophy, it seems to be something very strange that one who is a believer in Buddhism can at the same time admit, can at the same time follow Marxism. But that this is possible can be seen in the case of Rahul Sankrityayan. Now, why did Rahul Sankrityayan, or how did Rahul Sankrityayan combine these two? Rahul Sankrityayan noticed that in Marxism we can have a practical philosophy, And he complemented the ethical and philosophical principles of Buddhism with Marxism. He identified the shared ideals in their critique, that is, both Marxism and Buddhism were opposed to dogmatism, and both of them advocated equality and societal transformation. Sankrityayan argued that Marxism offered the tools necessary to implement the changes envisioned in Buddhist thought, particularly in the realms of economic and social reform. In the text, Scientific Materialism, which I have just now mentioned, Rahulji has shown how the scientific spirit of the Buddhists, especially the works of Dharmakirti, has been able to overcome the drawbacks of the dialectical idealism of Hegel or the dialectical materialism of the Marxists. Though Dignago has been though Dignago has been respected as the father of Indian medieval logic, the contribution of Dharmakirti, the contribution of Dharmakirti in Buddhist studies has been so profound and vast that the whole of Indian philosophy, even of the non-Buddhist schools after him, bears the mark of his influences. Sri Harsha, belonging to the Vedanta tradition, mentions in his Khandana Khanda Khadya the vastness of Dharmakirti's views in the following words: Durabadha ivo cha ayam Dharmakirte pantha iti avohiteno bhavyam iti. Rahulji himself had great admiration for Dharmakirti. In his monograph on Buddhist philosophy, after mentioning the observations of great logicians, great Indian logicians like Bachaspati Misra, Jayanta Bhatta, Sri Harsha, and others, he opines that the sharpness of the intellectual power of Dharmakirti is better appreciated by modern scholars, for they would be able to realize his worth in the context of the present day philosophical and scientific advancements. Next slide, please. Now, the seven works and two auto commentaries have been said to be written by Dharmakirti. Of them, the Pramana Vartika is the most important one and is considered to be his masterpiece. The importance of this text can be understood from the following data. Of about 170,000 slokas translated from Tibetan, 137,000 verses are on Dharmakirti's works, and of them, 105,000 verses are on the Pramana Vartika alone. Such a huge composition on Dharmakirti's works indicate the importance of Dharmakirti in Indian philosophy. As a title, Vartika, in the title Pramana Vartika, suggests that this book was proposed as a commentary on the Pramana Samuchaya of Dignaga. But ultimately, in respect of its content and methodology, this book superseded the original one regarding popularity, and as such, it was considered to be an original work on epistemology and logic. Rahulji's contribution to the study of Dharmakirti consists in the fact that he recovered almost the whole of Pramano Vartika, along with the commentaries by Manoratha Nandin, by Pragakara Gupta, by Dharmakirti himself, and the sub-commentary of Karnaka Govind. In addition, and this sub-commentary of Karnaka Govind is on the Savritti, that is auto-commentary of Dharmakirti himself. In addition, Rahul Sankrityayan found the text Badonnaya and the commentaries on the Hetubindu or Chatter's Hetubindu Tika and the Nyayabindu commentaries on the Nyayabindu by Binito Devo also. Rahulji himself described the process of his discovery of the manuscripts in the following words. In my first journey to central Tibet, 1929 to 30, I was rather pessimistic. And after my return, I began to restore the Pramana Vartika from Tibetan into Sanskrit. But I had to stop soon after when I got the news of an incomplete manuscript of the Pramana Vartika from Nepal. My hope revived slightly, and I made my second pilgrimage to that country in 1934. But after getting the manuscript of the Badonnaya with Shantarakshita's commentary Vipanchitartha, a portion of Pragakara's Vasya on the Pramana Vartika, and many more works, my optimism increased considerably, which was justified by the two subsequent journeys in 1936 and 1938. Slowly but steadily, the veil of darkness lifted itself. Though he could discover so many important manuscripts, he felt very sorry for not being able to restore many other important Buddhist texts like the Pramana Samuchaya of Dignaga, Nyayamukha of Dignaga, Dharmakirti's Pramana Vinishaya, Santanantara Siddhi, and Shamunda Pariksha with its auto-commentary. The discovery of these texts was needed not only for understanding Buddhist philosophy, but for a comprehensive understanding of Indian philosophy in general. As Rahulji has expressed his expectation, if an edition of the Nyaya is published with copious quotations from the Pramana Samuchaya and the Nyayamukha, or if the student has already studied these two masterpieces of Dignaga before going to Uddotapara, the study of the Nyaya will become a joy and not a cause of headache to the teacher and to the students. Just to mention, or just to enable the students here to understand the spirit of Rahulji, I want to mention that Nyayabhartika Tika, which is mentioned here by Rahul Sankrityayan, is composed by Uddotapara. And this text is actually a commentary on the Bhashya, Nyaya Bhashya of Vatsyayana. Now, in this Bhashya, Vatsyayana had criticized the views of the Buddhists, and after Vatsyayana, we find that the Buddhist logicians, they had made some changes, and even these changes were not acceptable to the neo-philosophers. And so, Uddhatakara, in his Bhartika, criticized Dignaga for the reinterpretation of the for his new way of presenting the Buddhist view. But since the Dignago's texts are not available, when a student of neo-philosophy reads the views of Udayana, he is not able to understand properly what did Dignago say. So Rahul felt that had the texts of the Dignago been already before the students, then the students, after reading these texts, went to read the commentary of Uddhatakara, they would understand the neo-criticism in a better way. So that is why he said that the discovery of the Buddhist texts was necessary not only for understanding Buddhism, but for understanding Indian philosophy in general. Rahulji's contribution to the study of Dharmakirti consists in the fact that he recovered almost the whole Pramanavartika along with the commentaries by Manoratha Nandin, Pragapara Gupta, Dharmakirti himself, and the sub-commentaries, etc. Okay,
Ma'am,
next slide.
sorry to interfere. We have 2 minutes only, ma'am.
Oh, sorry. Then let me pass on.
If you can summarize, give your concluding comments, ma'am, we can come back in the form of question answer later. If anything important you want to
Actually,
point, yeah.
just a minute. Actually, why was Rahul Sankrityayan so much interested in Dharmakirti? Because he had shown that the Dharmakirti had Dharmakirti's Pramanavartika was the most important text of Buddhist literature, of Buddhist philosophy. Why? Because it is in this text that Dharmakirti showed that the authority of those who admit the authority of the Vedas, the agency of someone as the creator of the world, religion as recommending bath in the river for attaining Purna, caste discrimination, and starting meditation in order to get rid of all sins. These 5 views are actually due to the ignorance of the fools. This rational bent of mind impelled the Buddhists as opposed to the prevalent orthodox tradition to deny the authenticity of testimony as a means. So, thus, Rahul Sankrityayan's intellectual life was marked by transitions, by reflecting his quest for philosophical framework that aligned with his evolving worldview. From his early association with the Arya Samaj to his later commitments to Buddhism and communism, Sankrityayan consistently sought ideas that could address India's cultural and socio-political challenges. Rahulji has shown that the rationalistic spirit of Lord Buddha had been given a solid foundation through the logical works of Dharmakirti and his followers, which exhibit the application of logical reasoning not only to ontology but to epistemology and religious beliefs. In doing so, the greatness of his thinking ability has been exhibited. This intellectual power of Dharmakirti and the rationalist spirit of the Buddhists would remain unnoticed had the manuscripts of Pramanavarta and other works not been discovered. So the whole world of Buddhist owes their debt to Rahulji for his invaluable contribution and also for his writings on Buddhist thought and culture. Thank you very much.